Our speaker is Dr.ANG Peng Hwa, who is a professor at the Wee Kim Wee School of Communication and Information, Nanyang Technical University in Singapore, which is quite a good school in the Asia Pacific region. Professor Hwa is President-elect of the International Communication Association. His research interests lie in media law and policy, and he has consulted on the subject for governments of Singapore, Thailand, and Bhutan. He is the author of Ordering Chaos, Regulating the Internet, a book published some years ago, and very important for what is happening in the world today. He is a member of the Working Group on Internet Governance that was appointed by then UN General Secretary Kofi Annan to prepare a report on the 2005 World Summit on Information Society. Professor Hwa will join the Geo Institute Digital Media and Marketing Communications as one of the visiting faculty. He will teach in the area of media law, ethics, and policy. His talk today is very much focused on some of these very important issues, and we are pleased to have him to make this presentation in this session. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Frank, for the introduction. And it's a pleasure to meet you all a bit online. Professor Jane, too bad I have no opportunity to meet you earlier. It would be wonderful knowing your background. As for the background, I have lived in Ahmedabad for a year to help start a PhD program, or what they call the Fellows Program in Management, sort of doctoral equivalent under my call, the younger brother of our sponsors here. Right. So I was there when our current Prime Minister, Modi, was Chief Minister at Gujarat, and came this close to meeting him in person. We were supposed to meet. He had a 14-item program to show that Gujarat was the most prosperous state the most developed, most prosperous state in India. 14 items. Somebody gave me the list on my car, and I said, 14, okay, I can do 13 of them, but number 14 I cannot do. Number 14 was create a radio jingle in Gujarati. And I'm like, okay, I cannot do that. Let me try. I tried a while. I said, finally, I cannot do that at all. And they said, with ding dong, and finally they said, okay, all right, come and meet him anyway. And then 2 weeks before we were supposed to meet, they called the state, the government called the general election, and they went my chance to meet him, and he became the Prime Minister after that of India, right? So that's kind of history. So I came this close to meeting Mr. Modi himself. Okay, so let me begin now talking about AI. My background is that I have a small startup doing AI. It's mercifully broken even, so we hope to move forward on that. And we're developing some product in that space. But no worries. Although we are the part of marketing course, I will not be marketing the company, right? I'll be talking about AI and ethics. Okay, so Naman, I'm ready with the deck. Because we tried it earlier and there were some issues with bandwidth, so the presentation is coming to you from India, and Naman is controlling the slides. Okay, so this title that I have on ethics and AI, defining the issue, which is an important part of the ethical issue, and you see what I mean in a bit in this space. And also, of course, when we talk about issues, you want to see how we can resolve that. Next slide. Okay, so all of you are using AI already, right? You did a search, you were using AI. You use YouTube, the ads were served to you using AI. You use your phone to unlock, you were using AI. Chatbot, of course, you know, and even if you use recommendation engine, you are using some element of AI, although you could say that it's kind of a basic kind of element in this space. Next slide, please. So in AI, I think the first thing to know, what is AI here, you could say there are 3 levels. There are different ways of cutting it. So the first is what I call advanced statistics. You can use advanced statistics to sort of mimic AI, kind of looking close but not quite AI. And some of these spaces, Of course, there's the stereotype of Indians being good at mathematics. You folks can handle this very, very well, right? Advanced statistics. It looks like AI, but actually it is simply advanced statistics. So example I give is predicting traffic on the road. It looks like it's using AI, but you could use statistics to come to that. And then rules-based and machine learning, I'll come to in a bit, right? Okay, next slide, please. So this is one of the, I am marketing company after all, right? What we are doing is, because of our background in text, we're using AI for textual analysis. So the AI startup I'm with, we don't look at financial number figures, which is a big thing, fintech, huge, but looking more at text because of our background in communication. So using, you could say it's sort of advanced statistics, looking at the sentiment of people who give feedback, right? So if you look at this example, this is a telco. You have in-store experience, people inquiring, sales and purchase, servicing, and then of course after that. And what we found when the company engaged us was that the in-store experience was positive, but as they came to sales and service, it became sort of worse. And in fact, the worst part of it was the servicing and follow-up. So this tells you from this chart here, the red means bad, green means good, that the sort of bad sentiment or bad feelings about a company was more to do with servicing and follow-up. So example of how we might use AI, the sentiment analysis, for your company. Next slide. So let me give some examples about rule-based. I told you just now about sentiment using AI using advanced statistics. This is rule-based. So basically, you put the rule into the AI. So examples are spam filters. Nigerian prince, spam right away, right? Okay. And then right now, Outlook has got this thing called focus, which means that you are kind of more relevant to you, less to do with reading and so forth. You have to respond. Focus. So again, this can be using rules, right? This is from your organization goes to focus. That's one example. Influencer advertising as well. You could see that which influencer is having more engagement, more views, more clicks. You would rate that higher, and then they will be selected to match products. What kind of products is this person best with? This is also an AI product that we developed. So to think of this, like I want to market a skincare product for pregnant women, right? And the reason is that pregnant women are more careful with products because it may affect the baby. So who will be the influencer best suited for that, right? Pregnant, right? So mothers, obviously female, skincare, maybe baby sort of thing. So who will be the people in this market? So you, by filtering using rules, you can get your AI kind of program for influencer marketing. And then even your recommendation engines, this can be using rules based, right? The more clicks, the higher it goes up. By regions, more relevant. Yeah. So you can use different rules for AI. Next slide. So rules-based AI has been used before. An example here I give is that of this IBM machine that was programmed for chess. Chess is quite predictable in the sense that the next move. There are only so many moves on a chessboard. It's a lot, right? It's not infinite, right? But still sort of point is that you can actually use rules, and actually IBM did that. Use rules-based programming to defeat Garry Kasparov. Interestingly, when they used machine learning for AI, the first game that they played, some kind of championship, the AI gave away the queen, and the reason is that the champion players, when they lose the queen, they do it for a reason, right? And then they want to win. So if you use this kind of rules-based, let the machine do it, what happens is that the machine thinks that, oh, if I were to surrender the queen, then I will win, because in the past, people who surrender the queen go on to win. But that's not the case, right? You need all kinds of backup there. So this is where your rules-based need to be supervised. Here is supervised machine learning. It's basically a decision tree, right, to do it. So the point is that a lot of AI that is being used right now, they are not very advanced kind of AI, quite simple. And in fact, in the marketplace, I would say once you get to this stage, you can do quite a lot actually. I was surprised when I did a startup. I did a startup to understand more the policy side. So I'm not involved in the operations. I would meet maybe 2 hours a week to sort of see what's going on and talk about some issues of ethics and so forth. But the people that are running it sort of on their own, right? Okay, next slide. So AI, first thing to note is that you need a minimum of 50,000 data points, right? It's quite a bit of data, yeah, 50,000 data points. Look for patterns in data. Okay, I will show you what's important a bit. You develop the algorithm, you test the algorithm with new data. Oh yeah, the backroom operations of my startup is in Bangalore. I mean, where else, right? Okay, next slide. Next slide. Okay, so to sort of clarify this space here, so AI is umbrella term, artificial intelligence is the overall term. You have your rules-based, then you have machine learning, okay, the second circle, and then deep learning, okay, this is unsupervised. You let the machine do it, right, on its own. There's a famous case of the Atari game, the brick wall, Breakout. And they let the machine play. There's no rules whatsoever, let the machine play. And after about 500 games, the machine was very, very good. Developed strategies that the scientists were not aware of, you know, and of course became very, very good as a result. The next one, next slide. The famous case, and if you have Netflix, you might want to look at this, if you're interested in this space of AI, Alphago, created by this company called DeepMind that eventually got bought out by Google. Okay, and I think that the technology that they developed helped develop voice recognition, right? So there's a big jump in voice recognition about 2018. So you speak now, you would get quite good results. So Alphago was this really revolutionary AI because remember the IBM 1997? They developed the AI using rules. This one was not developed using rules, it was really deep learning. What happens with deep learning is that, you know, I have people come up to me to tell me that, oh, AI uses the data, so they always show, you know, old results, you know, only what you've seen before. That is not true. Alphago developed strategies that Go masters had never seen before. In other words, something totally new. And in fact, some of these strategies are being tried out now. They're looking at, so in other words, think about it, right? The machine is giving the human being new ideas, new creative ideas, you know, how to develop this game. So the human beings are now trying this out, right? So this is really kind of an interesting you know, development here. Next slide. Okay, so some deep learning AI in use right now, and in fact right now. Okay, some of you have vehicles where you have lane assist. Okay, there are different levels of vehicle autonomy. 5, so lane assist is I think 3. So if you are going out of your lane, the car will kind of push you back. It won't push you back sort of like forever, you know, but it will kind of put you in the lane. So my car I bought partly for that reason, because of this technology. It will also apply the brakes if somebody steps out in front of the car, right? So this is AI. Okay, I'll show you why it's AI in a bit. The lane assist, what it means is that to change lanes, I have to signal. If I don't signal, the car will actually resist and I have to kind of fight it. So in a way it's good. It forces me to think and plan beforehand and change. Medical diagnostics, this is an area, some of you would probably know that India actually has a lot of your radiologists looking at x-rays here in India before, but now these are being replaced by AI, right? Looking for patterns in the x-rays or whatever scans to see unusual patterns and then flag them. And they've done this, in this case, Andrew Ng, he was at Stanford, I think now he's in China, one of the AI companies, you know, on medical, and it was in education and now medical diagnostics, so generally in the AI space. This deep learning, there are many levels, okay, and at this level that Andrew Ng is, you probably need a PhD to get there. But once you get there, companies will throw money at you. You're talking $1 million a year US easily, right? Sort of starting level in this AI deep learning space. customer support. Okay, so you often hear that, you know, we will they ask you the machine will ask you that, you know, when you call, the machine will call you, ask you for information about yourself, and say you do something to it, right? And they will say like they will it's still but they'll ask you some comments. You make some statements, right, about your customer support, right, the chatbot and so forth, what you're looking for. There are pretty advanced AI that is trying to gauge your personality to fit you with the customer support person who will be most able to calm you down. So if you're angry, they will find somebody who can, like, you know, kind of calm you down. If you're looking for some information, somebody else, from the experience, who will be the best person to help you in your case, calm you down, you know, get you through quickly, right? So this is really, this is advanced AI indeed. You need customer support, right? So it's no longer just a matter of, you know, giving you answers, but actually looking at your personality as well. It's a bit controversial, but definitely it is happening now, right? Next slide. So what else can AI do? And again, I'll tie it towards the end here, right? So this is a project, interesting project. This is Singapore Changi Airport, definitely a world-class organization. Why? Every comment that you put on, you post to them, they will reply. Every comment, right? So they have in a year 10 million comments. Okay, 10 million comments. A lot of them are like little clicks, so you don't know the answer, but 10 million comments. If you read one comment a second, it will take you 8 hours. It will take you 1.5 years. Okay, 18 months. We just come think of the semester, the Joe Institute, the flagship programs. Either you read 1 second of Changi Airport's comments, or you take a Joe flagship program, right? They're the same length of time, 18 months. They are 50% doing this. So we were proposing that we'll look at your comments, we apply AI, we will send the comments to the relevant department. We will have tailored templated answers, right? We will draft a reply, and all that a person does in the relevant department is to click either edit or just simply click it. We estimated that for what this they were doing, instead of 50 persons, they needed just, actually if we put 5, but actually you just need 4, right? So that tells you the scale of possible displacement of employment from 50 persons to 4 persons. 5, you know, more than enough, but 4 persons definitely can, right? So this is the scale of what AI can do, right? Really displace labor. Next slide. This is an interesting ad done by AI. What Lexus did was to take all the award-winning ads about cars, luxury cars, and then see what they can do in terms of coming up with a script for an ad. Okay, so I'm going to leave the Naman to play the video. Okay, so this is an ad that the downside. Okay, yeah, this is the next one. Okay. This is AI based as well. So it's the downside is that it lacks a narrative glue. So you can see that the human being is still important and critical to the AI space. Okay, next slide. Yeah. Okay, AI is heavily dependent on data, and I'm going to show you really this is a case of a fatal result. the result of the lack of data. Next slide. Okay, so this is the famous case of unfortunate case of a cyclist who was killed while walking her bike across the actually a highway. Yeah, a highway. Okay, next slide. And I want to show you you know what was missing here. Okay, so you see, look at this, right? You see this lady, she's pushing her bike. And in case you're wondering why is she pushing her bike, there is a grocery bag on the bicycle handlebars. Okay, all right. Next slide, please. Sorry, this is now no, not next slide. Sorry, yeah, the image, the Google search image. I want to show you what happens when you search for Google. So I want Naman to go over. Look for Naman. Yeah, scroll down. Look for a cyclist who is pushing the bike. Do you see that? It's hard to find. Yeah, keep on scrolling. Yeah, keep on scrolling. Yeah, you see that? There, right now, you see how far we've gone down, right? There, so far we've not seen any cyclists walking the bike. You see that? Okay, some more. Okay, well, stop there. You see that? Okay, wait, you have one now. One person carrying the bike, right? Okay, scroll on some more. Okay, you see there is no cyclist. Okay, wait, stop there. Yeah. Okay, somebody stopped but not pushing a bike. All right. Okay, you can go back to the slides now. Thank you, Naman. So you see that there is, the point is that the AI cannot recognize, or what, it's not fair to say could not properly recognize that this person pushing a bike is a cyclist. Instead, they expect to see a cyclist on a bicycle, okay, and certainly not with a grocery bag. So once something is really out of the ordinary, it is difficult, right? Someone had a point about the lane assist being rules-based. No, lane assist is not rules-based, because lane assist, you have to recognize the lines. I mean, it's obvious to us as human beings, right? It's lines, but they need recognition of the lines. Autonomous vehicles, you guys would know that they're having a hard time. So in fact, Uber gave up the whole autonomous vehicle pursuit after this accident. What they found was that, you know, it's hard to believe, right? What throws the technology of recognition on the road off, when you drive, leaves on a tree. Think about it, right? The leaves on a tree are never the same on the road, right? It could be wind blowing or whatever, right? So they're not exactly the same. The road is the same, yes, but the leaves on the tree are not. So similarly, lines on lane markings, they look to us as identical, but because this AI is kind of sharp looking for exactly identical stuff, right? It gets thrown off. So you can easily throw it off. So for example, you guys would hear that, oh, China, they have this technology to recognize the face, right? So a lot of you Indians, when you go to China, they can't recognize you because the faces are not Chinese faces, right? So all you do is paint a face black, you know, darken your skin or whatever, you get thrown off. So it's so heavily dependent on data. This is the issue. Google has managed to overcome this because it's through a lot of their data, right, to voice recognition. So voice recognition has had a big quantum leap in 2018. I myself been trying voice recognition for many years, never really worked, and then Google threw in literally billions of data points, and then that has worked better. Okay, next slide. Yeah, sorry, this one. The lack of data can lead to discrimination. Okay. Next slide. I'm sure you all know this. Okay, so you can see that this technology here is pretty good, but you can see that it recognizes females more poorly than males, partly because of images, right? And then the lighter skins more easily than a dark skin, right? Generally speaking, okay. The Google guy did something really crazy, you know, really crazy. So to rectify this, the engineers, I hope the engineers in our group here, in this group here, be careful, right? What they did was that they went to take pictures of homeless men to correct this issue of bias, right? And of course, it created its own controversy, right? I mean, these guys were thinking like, you know, I'm trying to be fair, right? But that's not how you do it, right? So in this case, the lack of data led to this issue of discrimination. Okay, next slide. And this can be bad. You can see in this case, it's lack of data, because what happens is that here are two persons. This is a program called Compass, and actually it's been stopped, right? Trying to predict parole, the people should be paroled. So the one on the left was a white person, the one on the right was a black person, and you can see that the black person was rated at high risk, even though look at it objectively, would be lower, should be lower. This is again the result of data that's incomplete, so it leads to discrimination. Right, next slide. Okay, so we're coming to the ethics part of it. I've given you kind of a whole background about what AI can do very quickly. So my argument is that when it is wrong, there is no ethical dilemma. It's not really an ethical issue, right? Next slide. So when it is wrong, don't do it, right? Discrimination is wrong, not just from the point of view of you say it's ethical, but it's for AI's point of view, it is not good AI, right? I mean, why would you want to use AI that doesn't work well, right? You can understand why AI works the way it is if you sort of understand AI, right? So let's look at, if you're trying to predict Nobel Prize winners, okay, because in the past, Nobel Prize winners will tend to be men, like 90% of Nobel Prize winners are men. You feed that in, you ask the AI to predict, it would predict male, right? Why? The data is such that it would predict male, right? So discrimination, so it is, if you're trying to predict the future now, going looking for, it doesn't make sense. It would be, to me, plainly wrong. So I define an ethical issue or ethical dilemma as one where it is right versus right. Because if it's right versus wrong, don't do the wrong thing. If your boss wants to fire you for telling the truth, that is wrong of the boss. Yes, you may lose your job, right? And it doesn't mean that, you know, being ethical, everything will go well for you, right? I mean, otherwise it'd be easy to be ethical, right? So that's not the issue. I'm talking about ethics itself, right? So for ethics itself, if you do something wrong when there is an alternative right course of action, that is wrong, right? So it's, to me, that's not an ethical issue. And I want to really confine our discussion talking more about the ethical dilemmas. Okay, next slide. So here's one, right? You all know search pricing of of the ride-sharing companies, right? So here we had an extreme case of the subway train breaking down, and the rides went from like $40 to $200, right? And so the question is that ethical or not? And my argument is that, well, I think it's an issue here, and at the very minimum, we should know what is behind this black box of, you know, search pricing. Okay, so one way to kind of resolve this ethical issue is to look at how the companies have done search pricing, right? You can't just say, oh, the technology did it, right? Because you had a part in putting something to the technology, making the decision. And in fact, in the piece that I have here, I don't know if you know, if you look at your pricing, right? The prices of your rides are never in divisible numbers. They are always in some odd number. The rumor was that Uber was able to check on your charge of your battery. And so if you are a female in a dark area at night and your battery is low, Uber will charge you a higher price, simply because you are female, dark, battery is low. And Uber, the CIO came out to deny it. But interestingly, he made the remark that when the numbers are unusual, let's say instead of $3, right, it's like $3.13. People were more willing to pay $3.13 than $3 because they think $3.13 is done by the computer. $3 is done by a human being, $3.13 is done by a computer. People were more willing to pay the sort of unusual number. So this example of what I mean by what is behind this black box that they've used to determine pricing for these ride-sharing companies. So I think transparency is certainly one way out of this. Right. Next slide. So search pricing to me is an ethical dilemma because it's not so straightforward, right? Because some of you would probably be thinking that, yeah, you know, why should this be an issue, right? Because it's the market forces, right? Market forces at work. So in a way, the company is right to set a business, I set this at a price. Of course, provided there's competition, right? And there is, then I can set the price I want. And if you don't like my price, you just go to my competition, right? But consumers also have the right to know the basis of pricing, right? So it's a case of right versus right. How do you manage this? So I think this, to me, this is an ethical dilemma worth investigating. Next slide. So what do you do? How do you resolve it? So I written on this. If you search, this AI and put my name in, probably find a post that I've done for my the startup, part of content creation. So these are the 3 typical examples of ethical approaches to resolve such issues. So the first is a utilitarian approach, right? Maximum welfare for maximum number of people. The problem with this is that how do you know what's the maximum welfare for new technology, right? Can you know? I mean, it's not possible, right? So I don't think that very quickly, right? I'm going to this very quickly. These kind of questions we'll discuss in more detail in class when I hold it, right? So this is very challenging. I would say this is utilitarian approach doesn't work in this space. The second one is a version of protect the weak, right? So it's typically in this case you think of the consumer, but really is this the weak is the consumer, right? And if you protect the consumer, is it really in the best interest that you don't allow such pricing, for example, right? Or you cap it, right? Is that really in the best interest or not? So to me, that's not really clear. And then in other cases, it's not really clear who the weak are, right? So my own recommendation is to use Aristotle's golden mean, which is not a mathematical mean, although people talk about how courage is between recklessness and cowardice, but in real life, what is the middle path, right? So I would say that to think of Aristotle's golden mean not as the middle path, but as a creative solution between 2 rights. So you want to first of all be sure that you're right versus right. Second, find a creative solution, not a compromise really, but try to find a solution that meets both goals. Next slide. So this is a slide I used in class, and I in Raphael's School of Athens. My last major holiday of 2019, I was actually in Rome at the Colosseum, which is near this place. But unfortunately, this place is so popular that you must book to in order to see it. So I didn't get a chance to see this. Next time, maybe, when we can travel. So this is Raphael's School of Athens. You can Google. It's a wiki page to it. That's how big time it is. All right. It shows the philosophers of Athens. In the middle are Plato and Aristotle. On the right hand side in slightly more detail. Okay, look at Plato's hand. Right, it's pointing up. Right, and look at the archers. Okay, the archers are the archers, but they are supposed to support the sky. Right, archers hold up the sky. So Plato is the one sort of giving the more theoretical approach. Like, okay, what I'm doing is holding up the heavens. Right, I'm giving you this thing to hold up the heavens. Look at the book he's holding in his left hand. It is vertical. So his hand is vertical, his right hand is vertical, pointing up, and it ties in with the arch there. His left hand is holding a book in a vertical format. Look at Aristotle. Look at his book. The book is saying this way. It's horizontal. Look at Aristotle's right hand, also horizontal. Okay, and the book actually, if you can read it, you can look for it. It says ethics. This is Aristotle's view of ethics. I don't know how many people think that ethics is kind of unrealistic and so forth, right? I think people are a bit more aware now about the value of ethics. Used to be some long ago now, of course. When I have this class on ethics, I would ask the students, how many of you think ethics is unrealistic? People are like, yeah, it's unrealistic, unrealistic. Then I say, okay, all right, good. How many of you want to work for an unethical company? And no hands will go up, right? Nobody will work for an unethical company, right? No hands will go up. How many of you want to buy from an unethical company? Right? No hands will go up again, right? So I said, first of all, you will not buy from an unethical company. Secondly, you don't want to work for them. Then how can this unethical company survive, right? How can ethics be unrealistic if being unethical means you have no employees and nobody buying from you? And you see the class like, okay, let's talk about this further. So Aristotle's view is that ethics is not only realistic, it is practical. So you see Aristotle's view is that this is it's practical wisdom. right? The way to think about ethics, right? That's to how to resolve it, right? So this is Aristotle's golden mean. It is a creative, practical solution. Next slide. So this is an example of a possible way to address it, and this is transparency. Rajesh Srinivasan is one of our top IT lawyers in Singapore. So yeah, he's obviously thought about it, and in fact, I know that the firm is doing some work in the legal analytics using AI. They've got a small company doing AI in the legal analytics space. So one recommendation, of course, being ethical, is that when you have AI application, disclose as much as you can, of course, the algorithm, or at least the basis for the algorithm. There is an element of black box because you don't really know what goes on inside the deep learning. It's just not possible to know. You don't really know. Think about, I told you before, the Alphago. How did this program come up with ideas that no Go master had ever thought of before? No one knows that. Really, no one knows that. So some elements just cannot be revealed. But can you reveal what data was what data went into developing this AI, this algorithm, right? How will the data affect, like you say, the decision, right? You can think of say AI for traffic planning, right? The traffic light, let's say, right? What data was used to determine the flow of traffic, right? So there are some element of transparency is helpful. In the case of search pricing, what factors go in to determine search pricing? Is it the stage of the battery charge? Is it because they're male or female, right? So some elements you make it clearer, then in a way that makes your AI more ethical, right? Because then you resolve some of the issues and some of the suspicions around your technology. Next slide. I'm coming to wrap up now. Okay, so I want to poll this one. Okay, and I've asked Naman to handle the poll. How many of you think that unemployment caused by AI is an ethical issue, right? Okay, how many of you? I'd like to do a poll. Yeah, how many of you think that unemployment caused by AI is an unethical issue? I showed you all earlier that AI can lead to it can displace unemployment, to be accurate, because some work just gets done much more quickly, with AI. If you can imagine, for example, that your traffic lights could be managed by AI, potentially you may not need as many traffic policemen or women on the roads. That's one example. Example I gave you all of the 50% employed to process comments at Changi International Airport. Potentially, you only need at most 5% instead of 50. 45% are displaced, right? Okay, all right. Sunshine, are you the one doing it? Okay, all right, sure. Okay, all right. So this is good. Yeah. AI can cause unemployment, people to be unemployed. Is this an ethical issue or not? And 59%, almost 60% said no. Yes. This is a very common response. Thank you, Sanchayan. Yeah. And the argument is that this is the argument that my students give, and I presume it's a master student, by the way, like many of you here are or planning to be. The argument is that if you consider it an ethical issue, then are you not saying that technology, whatever technology causes, would be ethical issues? My answer is that when this technology has the potential to cause a lot of people to be unemployed, should this not be considered an ethical issue? Then we come to the question of what is an ethical issue? What is the purpose of ethics, right? And the purpose of ethics is kind of a very broad picture, human flourishing. In other words, we are living better, we are better human beings as a result of ethics. So when something gets in the way of that, I think you should consider it an ethical issue. So this is what I meant in my title, right? Defining the problem. I think we need to define unemployment caused by AI as an ethical issue, and then look for creative ways to resolve these ethical issues. you may disagree with me, and in ethics, that's part of the issue, right? There is no absolute, well, okay, let me correct myself. There is no possible, again, let me correct myself here. It is difficult to enforce, and it is difficult to be punished for not doing it. Okay, but there may be consequences down the road, right? So I think if you take one cause versus another, there is sort of a better choice. It's not always true that it's right or wrong, but sort of a better choice. I think the better choice is to say that it is an ethical issue. Let's see what we can do with it. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so these are some ethical issues that we talked about: unemployment, inequality, right? Is it fair that some people have a lot more as a result of this AI? Think about it, right? If, okay, Changi Airport now, because of the pandemic, we didn't deploy the program, right, that we developed. Instead of 50%, they now employ only 5%. They have saved the salary of 45%. Who keeps that money? Do you think Changi Airport will say, well, my goodness, we've saved money, let's give it to our passengers passing through, right? Sorry, and this is Singapore, this is the world. Sorry, you get a kite, okay, then look at some strings and go on a windy day and go and fly that, right? So no, right? Think about, okay, we talk about bias, we talk about, okay, safety. Yeah, so some of these are quite clear, sort of potential clear ethical issues, or raising issues that we are concerned about. But some of them are exactly the point, and this is the one I want to raise, right? So issues that are not really clear, right? I think we need to define them as ethical issues. Next slide, and this is my last slide. Okay, so this one is an interesting one. I came across this when I was the company the startup we are launching some writing tools, because we're in tech space, writing these tools, and I'm looking for AI writing tools. I found one, and okay, I'm not sure this is actually a good thing to tell you guys, but you guys would know. You come across them, sure. This writing tool gives you an outline for a paper, could be term paper, yes, could be term paper, okay, and gives you sources as well. So it tells you where it picked it up from. So of course, basically you would just cut and paste, and then gives the sources, and then it will tweak the text so that plagiarism detection will not pick it up as plagiarism. Okay, my question to you is my final one, and I want to leave you on kind of an open note here. Would you market this AI tool if it is designed to defeat plagiarism? In other words, it will plagiarize, and then it will tweak the text so that it will bypass plagiarism detection. Okay, all right. Sunshine, please run a poll. Would you market or create a writing tool that can avoid plagiarism detection? It's designed to avoid plagiarism. Okay, so would you create such a writing tool, or would you be allowed to? So the issue of ethics of this, right? It's anonymous, so you can write what you truly feel, right? Okay.
Yeah, just publishing the results.
All right. 60. Okay, 40% said no, 40% said yes, you're allowed to, and so yeah. So you can see how this is really a realm of ethics, right? Because no one is saying that it's illegal, right? No one is saying it is wrong. It's up to you to decide how to do it. And is there a better choice? I think it's a better preferred outcome. I tell my students, by the way, that the only thing worse than being caught for plagiarism is not being caught for plagiarism. Okay, and I show them some news items of a president of Germany who I think was appointed and then had to step down from the potential appointment because I forgot he or she was caught for plagiarism. And then others who were like given high appointments, and then somebody found it plagiarized in the university, and then so they were forced to resign. And it's a famous author, I think Stephen Ambrose, a historian, and it's kind of sad because he was accused of self-plagiarism. He's a historian, American historian, self-plagiarism, and he died soon after that. Of course, he's a bit old and it's in a late 70s, so I don't know whether it kind of affected him or not, but it wasn't a good outcome. Yeah. So the point, of course, is that plagiarism is not a good thing, so there is a preferred outcome to this. I want to leave it on a kind of a note so that there offers some room for discussion then. Okay, so thank you then.
Thank you, Dr. Ang. I think that was a very, very good session and lots to think about. I think that's what you intended as well. The questions kind of reflect that. I mean, since you left us with this poll, so I probably will take the first question in terms of, there was a lot of discussion in the beginning of your presentation about, okay, if it's wrong, it's wrong. So there is a question which says that, okay, if no ethical dilemma, if the issue is wrong, was there in one of your slides. But who decides what is wrong?
No, when it's wrong, we're talking about, for example, I mean, you have to decide what is wrong, and by wrong, they can have some negative consequence. So we're talking clear wrongs, illegal activity kind of thing, yeah. So not wrong in a moral sense, but clear, you know, legal issues there. Lying, I would say, would be wrong because of the potential for some harm somewhere. It's the ambiguous part, like I mentioned, is that this issue of unemployment, inequality, like I mentioned here also. For example, the writing app they're developing then for schools, and the question is, should you show the grades or not? Okay, and the reason why we decided not to show the grades is that students can game it, so it looks like they are doing well, but actually when it comes to the final exam they may not be doing well. So we decided that for this writing tool that we're developing, we will not show grades. I mean, you know, so that's an example of what I mean by right and wrong. Yeah. Okay, I know it's not totally clear, but I hope that leads some way. Yeah.
So there are a few questions around bias as well. Like you spoke a little bit about bias. So I think the main crux of these questions is like, how do you design AI systems to get rid of bias? Because is it truly possible to eliminate bias from AI designs?
It is. I would say that for bias, you really need to know how AI fits into the sort of the real world, right? So the classic one is Amazon, and how they're trying to identify engineers, and they found that the AI was picking up male engineers because the historical record was that it's male. I mean, I can understand why that's the case. So from the point of view of HR, because we know that they are good, you know, female engineers for sure. What it means is that they're missing out. So I would say that for something like bias, the way to address it will be to look at kind of what is missing when this thing is biased. So it's not just a question that, oh, it's not accurate, but there are negative results. Your AI is not delivering the kind of results that should be delivered based on, you know, what it purports to do, right? To select good engineers. So bias in this sense that, you know, it leads you kind of astray. Is it possible to be totally free of bias? That's a good question. I'm not really sure. What we can, because you see, bias assumes that there's this line, and then you're away from this line. The thing is that how do you know this is the line, right? So this is where it gets tricky. Yeah. So you basically try to minimize the bias so that your program is the most accurate that it is. Yeah.
Okay, so since you ended with saying that it gets tricky, so there's another tricky question. So if who, according to you, should be held responsible if any harm arises from a decision which is augmented by AI?
Okay, it's a good question, no, really. Yeah, just talking about this. Yeah. And the reason is that if you look at our technology, we are becoming less responsible, right? And this technology would suggest that, if AI, this thing happens because of AI, it's not me, right? It's not me, it's the AI, it's the data we put in, and data you can see, I can show the data, you know, it's not. AI, the program that comes out is developed by people who give some inputs into it. So if there's something wrong with it, let's take the writing tool that you are developing. If it doesn't turn out good results, of course, you, the developer, will be held responsible. You should be, right? And in fact, a lot of things that are happening now, we are blaming it. Well, it's not blaming it. We don't know who to blame, no? And the whole point is that we become more socially distant, AI is one example. If you think of apps, right? If something happened, the app developer may say, it's not my app. My app was working good. It's the OS, it's the iOS or the Android system that's causing this mix-up. And you say, oh no, it's not me, but it's the phone. So the multiple layers, and everybody's trying to duck responsibility, right? For AI, yes, that's part of it. Accountability as well. Who is to be held accountable? And some of the ethical principles actually say that you should identify who is to be held accountable for the AI that when it fails. Yeah.
Okay, so the next question is, so the problem currently with AI-based decision-making seems to be that it relies heavily on correlation and not on causation factors. So why are AI algorithms being designed in this way?
No, it's not. It's really more correlation than causation. Okay, so let's take voice recognition, right? In the past, when the people thought of voice recognition, they looked at the pattern of the voice. But what Google did was to look at the words, predictive text. When this word appears, these other words tend to appear as well. Okay, they are n-gram, so two words. Two words. Once word appears, this next word likely to be this, or the 3 words and so forth, 4 words and 5 words. So the more you have, the greater the power of your predictive analytics of your AI. So the Google one that led to the breakthrough in voice recognition was using many words. So it is. I'm not sure it's even correlation. I guess correlation in the sense that when one word appears, the next few words will be very similar as well. So if you look at your phone, you can see this happening when sometimes when you type, to have the next word coming up, right? So this is predictive analytics based on this principle. If you look at the bicyclist that had an accident, I was hoping to see, but I don't know why I don't see this time around. In the previous version that I had, they showed people walking the bicycle, but everybody walking the bicycle was walking it on a pedestrian crossing. So what it means that the AI will associate a person pushing a bike with a pedestrian crossing, right? And so without that, then they can't recognize it. It's that intense. Yeah. So it's just the way the technology develops. Yeah. So I don't have an answer why this happened, but it's just the way that it needs to work. Yeah.
So, sir, while you were giving your talk, you give another example of a boss silencing a critical employee. So you said it was clearly wrong, but, and this is the question that was asked, if the boss feared the reputational harm the criticism might do to the company, wouldn't the situation amount to a dilemma, that is a right versus right?
Sorry, say that again, the last question.
So you gave the example of a boss silencing a critical employee, and you said that it was clearly wrong. So now here's the question that was asked. If the boss feared the reputational harm the criticism might do to the company, wouldn't the situation amount to a dilemma, that is a right versus right?
Yes, it is possible, but assume that the criticism is valid, right? I mean, many people silence you because they worry about it for themselves. So if you can position it as a right versus right, yes, then it's a true ethical dilemma. Yeah, it's possible, right? Let me give you an example of right versus, something that turned into right versus right. So this is a true story told to me by an editor. She had just signed a contract. Well, her magazine had just signed a contract with a restaurant for 1 whole year. So it was a monthly magazine, obviously a few years ago now. We don't talk magazine these days. And the magazine had a contract for a year. The contract amount was enough to hire a journalist full-time for a year. Okay, that's how valuable the contract was. She went to the restaurant. Her friend was late. She ended up sitting in the bar for 1 whole hour with his friend. They came, they had dinner there. The food wasn't good. Now what, right? So if you say the food wasn't good, then the restaurant owner may pull the ad, and there goes your 1 year contract and your journalist salary for the year, right? On the other hand, if you say that the food is good when it's not, then you get your reputation is affected. So what this person did, and it's a true story, she told me, she wrote, because she was at a bar for 1 whole hour, she wrote the review as though she was drunk, right? So it was a bit of humorous, a bit of slosh, but when you read the review, you know that the food wasn't good, okay? But the owner of the restaurant was happy with it. So she turned kind of right versus wrong, right? One or the other, into a situation where she was able to achieve both. And so this example of what I mean by Aristotle's golden mean, to try to arrive at a creative solution that meets both goals. Okay. So I've not have many other examples, but if you have other examples regarding the media especially, I'll be happy to get it from you, right? Okay.
So another question which asks that, so companies do not disclose what algorithms they use or the data they use to train them. So in such a scenario, how do you fit in ethics?
Yeah, so companies are not doing that. That's why what someone like me and others are saying is that the government should compel them to disclose, how they're using it. So in an op-ed that I wrote in a local paper, they should tell in this case, the transport regulators, what is the basis of the search pricing? How much are they charging, right? So there'll be some transparency at the level. I'm not asking to know the secret sauce so that I can duplicate it, your technology. I'm asking what went into it. What are the caps? What are the limits? Right? How are you defining it? Right. So this is what people are saying that should be done for AI. And in fact, some people will say that for all AI applications, everybody who develops that algorithm should disclose what this algorithm is supposed to do, where the data comes from.
Understood. So this next one is again based on one of the examples you use. So I think that's been very popular in the discussion because a lot of questions coming in based on them. So
Okay.
the last one that you used was about the plagiarism. How do you get away with plagiarism, basically, right? So the question is, if apps like Grammarly are being used on such a large scale, so I assume using it is ethical. So then shouldn't the program that tweaks some article a bit to defeat plagiarism detector also be ethical?
Well, actually, if you look at plagiarism, right? If you take the way that actually is defined, if you take a sentence and you just change the words, you keep the sentence the same, but you just change some words so that it is identical except for those few changes. You use the source to change some words here and there. It is still considered plagiarism. So in other words, if you were to put it to a human being that is to look at it, it will still be considered plagiarism. So Grammarly, I don't think it does that. I mean, talking about Grammarly in particular. That's out. But the point about being tweaking it and defeating the plagiarism detector, right? It will not be considered plagiarism based on the detector, right? But if a human being were to see it, it will be considered plagiarism. Okay, 1. 2, if you keep on doing this, if you're to keep on doing this, eventually you will not be writing your own creative stories, right? Eventually you'll be found out, right? Because you're just not practicing your creative skills, right? So that's not good for yourself. This is an example of what I mean by your human flourishing. So being ethical leads to greater human flourishing, right? So the sort of Aristotle's practical kind of thing, that leads to a better positive result than a short-term gain. The thing about not being ethical is that it leads to short-term gains. So there are gains, and in fact, generally, okay, this is generally, longer-term views are more ethical than short-term gains. Okay, so short-term gain compared with long-term, that is, if it is a choice, typically, not always, typically the short-term one is less ethical than the long-term one.
Understood, sir.
Okay.
So the next question, so maybe we have time for maybe a couple of more questions. Okay. So when AI system uses data augmentation techniques, some of the data is not real, but it's created data.
Yeah.
So do you consider this to be an ethical issue?
No, synthetic data is not, because the point is that I talked about how, so I know some of you not so familiar with space, because you need 50,000 data points, And it's kind of funny, but when your data is not enough, actually you get worse results, you know? It's like it's very strange. So it's not like, you know, a little bit of data is like vitamins, right? You think a little bit is more, you know, is good, and you know, if some is good, more is better, right? But it's not the case, right? You need to somehow cross some kind of threshold, otherwise you just don't get the results. So what some people do is what they call synthetic data. It's not fake news kind of data, but it matches kind of the framework. So in a way, you replicate it. Think of duplicating the results, like, you know, creating the results there. So this is a method that's been used to develop your algorithm in order to meet that requirement, that threshold. I don't know what the threshold is for now. I know that if it's you have some data as opposed to none, there's some that algorithm using it, some can actually be worse than having none. It's funny, yeah, I know. I have no idea why this is the case. I'm looking at it myself, yeah. Okay, so it's not an unethical issue there, not an ethical issue there.
Okay, so next one is more of a people question. So do you think that building a deep learning or a machine learning model, apart from business teams and developers and coders, is there also a need for a set of people who shall be for deciding the good or a bad about a particular decision? I mean, I think the larger question is, do we want people from other fields coming into these teams apart from the technical ones and the business ones?
Well, okay. My second slide was about use of AI, right? You can see use it in search. Who doesn't use search these days, right? And actually, interestingly, the cyclist slide. I don't, Sanjay, can you show the cyclist slide again, the search one?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, just the very first screen of the cyclist.
Just a moment.
Yeah, sorry, just a quick one. I want to show you something. Just the cyclist. Okay, not the slide, but the search on the Explorer, the browser. Yeah. Okay. The very top, all the way to the top. Go back all the way to the top. Okay. You see that top left hand. Yeah. Female. So this is not normal, right? There are obviously more male cyclists than female cyclists, right? Especially global, right? So Google has programmed this so that female comes first, right? Now, should Google program this so that when you search, the female cyclists come up first? Do you want to have to say that? What else is Google interfering in your search? You think the search is objective, right? You think just based on links, right? Don't you want to know what went into this? Right? So you can see how, because AI is so pervasive now, right? You want to have a say in how some of these are done, especially when it affects your life, right? Like I mentioned, search pricing is another example. What about recommendation of reviews, right? I was in Italy on that my recent trip, and obviously the restaurant we went to was a bad restaurant. Shouldn't be number one. It was the number one in Sicily, right? So I wrote a review to say why shouldn't be number one. You went to number 6. I'm a big TripAdvisor review. I have like more than 600 reviews, you know, on TripAdvisor. So I guess at some cloud. But I was surprised. Why only number 6? It should be way down. It shouldn't be even top half of the Sicily restaurant. Shouldn't be. It was bad. The people putting in the reviews were the waiters themselves. A lot of reviews had one reviewer, right? One reviewer, and complimenting the same person, right? Fake. But why don't they push it down, right? What about Twitter recommendations, right? So you see there are many ways for which the AI is actually affecting us in our lives now, right? What we read, what we hear, what we understand, even search, right? You can see, I just showed you, it's not so objective as you think, right? Okay, all right, thanks.
Okay, so I think we have time for one last question. So this is again, I think, based on one of the examples you used. So it's I think the search pricing example. So so it begins with like a statement. So the disclosing grounds for a decision that are morally questionable doesn't make those grounds permissible, does it? So the rideshare company that charges more because of the desperation of its customer is exploiting weakness. How does that become permissible just because it is disclosed? It isn't as if the customer is then able to turn down the ride. She's still vulnerable. So I think it's also trying to make a comparison between transparency and it still being wrong.
Yeah. No, I think okay. So that I'm a bit clearer. There's one question here by Manudip about raising the price of a product on e-commerce portal. No, I'm not saying it's unethical or not, because raising the price to us, we think that, okay, well, raising the price is demand and supply, right? My point is that some of these issues should be considered as an ethical issue. Let's discuss whether it's ethical or not, right? So that's where I'm coming from. Such pricing looks like something that should be done to moderate demand, right? So somebody who prepared to pay more maybe should be allowed, to do so. But when such pricing is excessive, right? So to give an idea, the one that was where the subway train broke down and the ride went from $40 to $200, the driver refused to take the money. The driver said, I cannot take this money from you, it's too much. The driver refused to take the money. That tells something is wrong, right? I mean, the drivers are not rich people, right? I mean, we know that, globally speaking, right? So the fact that the guy refused to take it tells you that he feels uneasy. It feels wrong. It feels wrong, morally wrong, right? You take the money, even though market forces, market forces, right? So my point is that let's consider first whether this is an ethical issue or not. Let's debate whether it is or not. That's the first concern. If it is, how can we resolve it using ethical principle? And then I suggested using Aristotle's golden mean. Transparency, what transparency does is it doesn't resolve all issues, no. Okay, I'm not saying that transparency resolves all issues, but transparency then forces the driver of the company, Ola or or Miru, whatever, to say, these are what I use to determine pricing. Do you agree? If you don't agree, you choose somebody else, right? So what transparency does is to force the company to disclose the basis for which it makes the decisions. And let's see whether this basis are good or not good, right? Okay, all right.
Thank you so much, sir. I think that was great. We still have so many questions. We're running out of time. So a lot of differing opinions, but I think that's the point of this topic. We get a lot of differing opinions and debate. Clearly necessitates the need to have more conversations around ethics. So with this, we come to an end to this masterclass. I'd like to invite Dr. Sriram Kalyanaraman, who is the program chair of the Masters in Digital Media and Marketing Communications program at GU Institute, to deliver the closing remarks. Dr. Sri is professor of journalism at the University of Florida's College of Journalism and Communications. At UF, he is affiliated with the Online Learning Institute and is setting up a media effects and technology lab. Previously, he was a faculty member and a director of the Media Effects Laboratory at the University of North Carolina's School of Journalism and Mass Communication. His primary research focuses on the psychology of new technologies, particularly as they inform persuasion and attitude change in online environments. Over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you so much, Sunshine. Hi, Peng Hwa. How are you? I haven't seen you in a few years with everything being closed. So Dr. Peng Hwa, thank you so much for such a stimulating session. So many thoughts running through my head while we were going through this, and also reflected by just the wealth of questions and all the great examples that you offered. So just to sum up my own thoughts when listening to Dr. Peng Hwa, I think it touched upon what I think are three of the most important grand challenges when we think about AI and technology and ethics. So getting upon the issues of surveillance and privacy, talking about bias and discrimination, but probably most importantly, what's the value of human decision-making and judgment. And that's something that Dr. Peng Hwa really stressed upon through the course of various examples. I know there were several questions which also reflected the diversity of content, asking about can we predict, for example, diseases? I think that was in the context of COVID, and Sunshine didn't have enough time to go through some of those questions because there's just so many great questions. Talking about it in terms of, how can we make our machines to be more moral? So that's, for example, an initiative which people at MIT are looking at, right? So can we avoid killing the human? If we do, if it's a choice between two humans, whom do we decide upon, right? So that's where the role of ethical decision-making also comes to the fore. And it was just fantastic, even within such a short session, to see that Dr. Peng Hwa was able to give us so many insights in terms of how to go about looking at these from ethical, theoretical decision-making perspective. So he gave us the framework of an Aristotelian system looking at the golden mean, but to also answer some of the questions which cropped up in terms of how do we make these decisions and what really is ethical. I would urge you to also look at the results of the polls which Dr. Peng Hwa conducted today. And if you see, there was no consensus. And that's really, I think, a microcosm of the difficulty that we see when it comes to ethical decision making. So a lot of times the challenge is to look at it within the framework of a particular ethical decision system or theory. So we looked at it in terms of the Aristotelian system, but we could also very well see that those answers might change if we looked at it from the perspective of deontology or utilitarianism or virtue ethics. So I think it's a great framework that you have given us. Some other things, when I was thinking about this, Dr. Jain referred to this in terms of Vice Chancellor Jain spoke about how ethical decision making are the cornerstone of what we hope to offer at GEO. And Dr. Shet was talking about one of our research institutes, which is going to be focused on AI for all. And the range of topics that we are talking about here, to me, that's, it's the icing on the cake, right? So we are talking about issues related to medicine and public health, and that's going to be one of our programs. We already know that one of our first programs is AI and DS, and that's what we're going to be studying here. But even when we look at some of the examples that you offered in terms of communications and journalism, all these fit in very well with why we are looking at certain interdisciplinary approach to higher education at GEO, and how this also gives us the types of opportunities to research these areas as well. Even in the context of this 1 hour, while Dr. Peng Hwa was doing his talk, I got a couple of alerts, my news alerts. One pertained to AI and how just yesterday, and this was reported in today's BBC, about how AI infused false networks are pushing forth a pro-Chinese government agenda. So that was the news just around a couple of hours ago. On the other side of the spectrum, there was another news item about how AI is spreading misinformation among the 18 to 34-year-olds in terms of how getting a vaccine is not good for them. So, the case in point was a 13-year-old girl who's saying that she wants to have children later in life. So she's heard that having the vaccine will make sure that she cannot get pregnant. So we're dealing with, a lot of really important ethical issues and dilemmas. But I want to end on at least some note of optimism. And, it's very difficult. Some say it's impossible to correct for human bias. But evidence-based research, and as Dr. Peng Hwa has shown with some of his own work, tells us that it's possible to identify and correct that bias in AI. So I think it's a great time for us as scholars, researchers, and people who are just interested in, coming forth with a just and diverse society to address these concerns. And there are certain initiatives that folks working in AI, some of us have looked at, OpenAI, and then the Future of Life Institute. So I would urge all of us who are of similar mind to look at how there are so many possibilities in this area for us to explore from an interdisciplinary perspective. Once again, Dr. Peng Hwa, that was quite fantastic and stimulating. Thank you very much.
And on my behalf also, thank you again for an enlightening talk.
Thank you so much, sir. So to all participants, we hope you enjoyed the session as much we enjoyed organizing it. So please do join us for our upcoming Artificial Intelligence Symposium in the month of August. We will also soon begin our maiden executive education programs in AI and DS, as well as digital media and marketing communications. Do follow our handles on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn to remain updated on GEO Institute. Once again, thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you soon. Take care and stay safe.